When we started that, I wasn't sure if we had stray cats there or quite what we had there, but awesome to be here. What a great day. So glad that we can come and worship God today on this holiday weekend. And what better way to kick that off than having a great time of worshiping God. I want to welcome you if you are visiting with us. Or I know it's always nice to have some a holiday. We have some people go out of town. I know the mountain ministry's off in the mountains having fun. And we also have some people come in from town. So if you're visiting with us, welcome. We're really so happy for you to be here. We're particularly want to extend a welcome to Dana and Jen Perkins. Where are they? Right here. Please stand. Please stand. And, as Mark had mentioned, their son, K-Sam, is going to be taking over the youth ministry here in the church. And let me just say thank you for bringing such an awesome young man into the world and raising him up. That's fantastic. And so I'm really so glad that we can worship. It's great to worship God. It's great to draw near to the Lord, and I know all of us really need that. And we've been going through a series the last few weeks, and this is the final installment of that, entitled Pray Like Jesus. And it is an effort to help us learn how to pray, and to pray like Jesus did. I don't think most of us know naturally exactly how to pray. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to us. And I want to make sure you guys can hear me, right? Okay, good. Okay. Just nod your head or do something, you know how that goes. It doesn't always come naturally to us. And so we've taken some time these last few weeks to review how Jesus prayed. We looked at the Lord's Prayer, and we examined that as far as how Jesus prayed. We looked at the prayer, the Gethsemane prayer, the prayer from the garden, and then the last 2 weeks, we looked at the prayer of protection. And today we could close the series off with the prayer entitled, or the sermon entitled, The Prayer of Forgiveness. And it's found here in Luke chapter 23, and I'll read it to you. In Luke chapter 23, verse 34, as Jesus was on the cross, he prayed this prayer: Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. On this day, Jesus did the most amazing thing, the most amazing gift any of us have ever received. He extended the gift of forgiveness, and he set an example of forgiveness. The Bible, it says in Matthew chapter 26, as he was there with the disciples in the upper room, he said, "This is my blood." This is, what we did in the communion just a minute ago. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Jesus paid a price, his own blood, to give us a gift, the gift of forgiveness. It's an amazing gift. Every single one of us in the course of our lifetime, we will greatly need it. The gift of forgiveness. If you've ever really blown it, which I think if I had a show of hands, I'd get a good number. And those of you who didn't raise your hand, I'd be worrying about you. We all deeply need forgiveness. All of us can look back on things we've done and realize, I should never have done that. I shouldn't have thought that. I shouldn't have acted that way. And we need to be forgiven. We also need to learn how to forgive. We need to know how to do it. What's the way? It doesn't exactly come naturally to us to forgive, and yet God really wants us to understand forgiveness and teaches us about forgiveness. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus taught the 12 when they were praying this prayer, "And forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors." He's saying, forgive us, we will accept forgiveness, and we will extend forgiveness. Life involves both. We have to accept it. We have to extend it. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 these words: "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." Those are strong words, aren't they? That our forgiveness before the Father is conditional on our forgiveness of others. And that's sometimes a bit of a hard theological point to swallow. You mean to tell me that I would go and stand before God, and I believe I'm okay, I believe I'm right, and that He would tell me, you weren't a forgiving person, therefore I won't extend forgiveness to you? Powerful point. A vital point. Our own forgiveness hinges on our learning how to forgive. But we say, well, how much should I forgive? Jesus answered that question as well when Peter asked him. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times? That's a good question, isn't it? If someone did the very same thing to you 7 times in a row, can you imagine that? Some offensive thing, they came to you one day. Okay, I'll let that slide. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. Now come on, that's 7th day. When they've made the same mistake 7 consecutive times, I think I would be a very gracious, generous person at that point to say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let this go one last time. Then after that, you and me, we're going to have some words here. We're going to have a problem between us. So Jesus gives them a very unexpected response. I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Now, I've never had anybody in the whole world do something to me 77 consecutive times. Praise God. I'm sure I don't think I'd have lasted that. But Jesus expresses how forgiving we really ought to be. What a powerful idea. Jesus, He has presented something really genuinely powerful: forgiveness. We all so desperately need to learn how to accept it and how to extend it. I heard an author one time express it this way. Somebody hurt you, maybe yesterday, maybe a lifetime ago, and you cannot forget it. You did not deserve the hurt. It went deep enough to lodge itself in your memory, and it keeps on hurting you now. You are not alone. We all muddle our way through a world where even well-meaning people hurt each other. When we invest ourselves in deep personal relationships, we open our souls to the wounds of another's disloyalty or even betrayal. There are some hurts that we all choose to ignore, but not every slight sticks with us. But some old pains do not wash out so easily. They remain like stubborn stains in the fabric of our own memory. Deserved flow from a dead past into a living present. A friend betrays us. A parent abuses us. A spouse leaves us in the cold. These hurts do not heal with the coming of the sun. We've all wished at one time or other that we could reach back to a painful moment and cut it out of our lives. Some people are lucky. They seem to have a gracious glance and secrete the juices of forgiveness. Their painful yesterdays die with the coming of tomorrow. But most of us find that the pains of our past keep rolling through our memories, and there's nothing we can do to stop the flow. I believe that to be true. I believe that is our experience so often, as each one of us have a certain number of hurtful experiences that are difficult to forget, difficult to forgive. And it really can turn into a profound challenge. How many of you guys have ever seen the movie Unforgiven? Who's seen that movie? That's a pretty cool movie. Not a cool movie, but it's an impactful movie. Now, Clint Eastwood was the one who starred in this movie, and I believe he produced it as well. And the whole theme is a whole bunch of folks that don't get forgiveness. And the movie starts off with these 2 cowboys, and this one cowboy disfigures a prostitute with a knife on her face. And then they call the sheriff in, and the sheriff, because she's a prostitute, chooses not to do anything. He says, well, it's not that big of a deal. She's a prostitute anyway. And that starts in motion these series of events. And now the cowboy's friend, Davy Boy, I'll just tell you his name, Davy Boy tries to make atonement. Davy Boy goes out and rounds up these set of wild horses, and he brings them back as payment to these women to say, hey, listen, can I make an atonement for my friend and give you these horses? And they just pelt him with rocks. They're like, get out of here with those horses, because that doesn't make atonement for what's been done. And instead, they send a bounty of $1,000 out to anybody who would come and kill these 2 cowboys. And of course, Clint Eastwood, William Money in the story, is the one who chooses to respond to this. A series of events happens, but William Money, Clint Eastwood, comes and kills those 2 cowboys. And in the course of it, his friend gets killed. And so he is furious that they killed his friend, and they put his friend's body in the street out in front of the saloon. And he comes into the saloon, and it's this climactic moment of the movie. And all these people are forming a posse to come and get him. And he comes in and said, who owns this place? And the guy goes, I do. And he pulls his shotgun out and he shoots him. And he says, you should have thought about that before you would put my friend in front of your saloon. And then he proceeds to kill all the guys who are there forming the posse. And the sheriff of the movie, I have a point here, trust me. The sheriff, Little Bill, he shoots Little Bill. And Little Bill's on the ground, and he looks up at William Money, and he goes, I don't deserve this, to die like this. I was building a house. And William Money says, deserve's got nothing to do with it. And he aims his gun at him. And Little Bill says, I'll see you in hell, William Money. And William Money goes, yep. Boom. Shoots him. And then he proceeds in the middle of this terrible rainstorm to sort of get on his horse and ride away. And as I was watching that, I was like, that's not very entertaining. That's not very entertaining at all. I like a movie that's entertaining. And the reason it's entertaining is there's a good guy and a bad guy. And there's some conflict and some struggle. But then at the end, the good guy wins. And the bad guy loses. The bad guy gets shot. The good guy kind of rides away. And it's positive. But the theme of this movie was, nobody's a good guy. No one's a good guy. The sheriff wasn't a good guy because he didn't take care of the situation with the prostitute. The prostitutes weren't good because they chose to kill these two cowboys. The cowboys weren't good because they committed this terrible crime. Certainly William Money, who's kind of a murdering person, he's not good either. The fact is, none of them are good, and none of them receive forgiveness. And so they ride away, and you're kind of like going, jeez, what kind of movie was that? That's a terrible movie. Give me Star Wars. Come on, man. Give me something that I like. It's entertaining. But it's a powerful movie because it amplifies something. Terrible things happen to us when there's not forgiveness. That same theme plays itself out in our lives, where there's an absence of forgiveness. Maybe we don't forgive a friend for their betrayal. Maybe we go through a marriage situation, a divorce, something where we don't extend forgiveness. Maybe you've been in a business situation where someone cheated you. You chose not to extend forgiveness. Maybe there's old hurts and old wounds that keep coming back, and we choose not to forgive. It unfolds like a bad movie that's not very entertaining and not very encouraging because bad things continue to happen to us. They have studied this subject scientifically, interestingly enough. They've done a lot of studies on this. In fact, there's a number of universities who have embarked on trying to figure out what happens to people if they choose not to be forgiving. Stanford University did a study like this. They rounded up a bunch of students, and the advertisement was, well, if you feel like you have a grievance or an old grudge or something you haven't fully worked through, we want to do an experiment. So they had them all come into their lab, and they hooked them all up to their little gizmos and stuff, and monitoring their heart rate and their pulse and all that kind of thing. And they said, I want you to think about this incident that happened. And sure enough, when they started thinking about it, their heart rate went up, their stress level, as they were measuring it, went up, and they experienced physical kind of pain symptoms. They did the very same thing where they said, well, don't think about it, and they went back down again. They've studied people over a long period of time. What happens to people if they have a grudge that they can't get over? They've studied them. What they found is that there's a higher incidence of cancer, heart problems, physical ailments. There's all kinds of things physiologically that happens to us. You see, Jesus is doing us a great favor by teaching us how to receive forgiveness and extend forgiveness. I wanted to read a little fable to you. It's a little story, and I think it amplifies this point. In the village of Falcon, in innermost Friesland, there lived a long, thin baker named Falk, a righteous man with a long, thin chin and a long, thin nose. Falk was so upright that he seemed to spray righteousness from his thin lips over everyone who came near him. So the people of Falcon preferred to stay away. Falcon's wife Hilda was short and round. Hilda did not keep people at bay with righteousness. Her soft roundness seemed to invite them instead to come close to her in order to share the warm cheer of her open heart. Hilda respected the righteous husband and loved him too, as much as he allowed her. But her heart ached for something more from him than his worthy righteousness. And there in the bed of her need lay the seed of sadness. One morning, Falk came home and found a stranger in his bedroom with his wife Hilda. Hilda's adultery soon became the talk of the tavern and the scandal of the Falcon congregation. Everyone assumed that Falk would cast Hilda out of his house, so righteous was he. But he surprised everyone by keeping Hilda as his wife, saying he forgave her as the good book said he should. In his heart of hearts, however, Falk could not forgive Hilda for bringing shame to his name. Whenever he thought about her, his feelings toward her were angry and hard. He despised her as if she were a common whore. When it came right down to it, he hated her for betraying him after he had been so good and so faithful a husband to her. He only pretended to forgive Hilda so that he could punish her with his righteous mercy. But Falk's fakery did not set well in heaven. So each time that Falk would feel the secret hatred toward Hilda, an angel came to him and dropped a small pebble, hardly the size of a shirt button, into Falk's heart. Each time a pebble dropped, Falk would feel a stab of pain, like the pain he felt the moment he came on Hilda, feeding her hungry heart from a stranger's larder. Thus he hated her the more. His hate brought him pain, and the pain made him hate. The pebbles multiplied, and Falk's heart grew very heavy with the weight of them, so heavy that the top half of his body bent forward so far that he had to strain his neck upward in order to see straight ahead. Weary with hurt, Falk began to wish he were dead. The angel who dropped the pebbles into his heart came to Falk one night and told him he could be healed of his hurt. There was one remedy, he said, only one, for the hurt of a wounded heart. Falk would need the miracle of the magic eyes. He would need eyes that could look back to the beginning of his hurt and see his wife Hilda not as a wife who betrayed him, but as a weak woman who needed him. Only a new way of looking at things through the magic eyes could heal the hurt flowing from the wounds of yesterday. Falk protested. Nothing can change the past, he said. Hilda is guilty, a fact that not even an angel can change. Yes, poor hurting man. You are right, the angel said. You cannot change the past. You can only heal the hurt that comes to you from the past, and you can heal it only with the vision of the magic eyes. And how can I get your magic eyes? Pouted Falk. Only ask, desiring as you ask, and they will be given to you. And each time you see Hilda through your new eyes, one pebble will be lifted from your aching heart. Falk could not ask at once. He had grown to love his hatred, but the pain of his heart finally drove him to want and to ask for the magic eyes that the angel had promised. And so he asked, and the angel gave. Soon Hilda began to change in front of Falk's eyes. Wonderfully and mysteriously, he began to see her as a needy woman who loved him instead of a wicked woman who betrayed him. The angel kept his promise. He lifted the pebbles from Falk's heart, one by one, though it took a long time to take them all away. Falk gradually felt his heart grow lighter. He began to walk straight again, and somehow his nose and his chin seemed less thin and sharp than before. He invited Hilda to come into his heart again, and she came, and together they began again a journey into their second season of humble joy. Cool story, isn't it? This gentleman, Falk, heart got heavier and heavier as he hated, as he was in pain, as he obsessed over what had happened to him. We do the same thing. We have things from our past that we obsess about. We think about it. It occupies way too much mental space in our brain. We don't get over it. We think about it over and over again. We assume that the things I feel today are of the fault of something that happened yesterday. We blame yesterday. We blame that event. We feel the feelings today. We say, well, it's because of this past event. And we feel those feelings over and over and over again, not realizing that it's our choice to feel those things. That we're in control and responsible for how we feel day to day. But instead, like Falk, the pebbles get bigger and bigger and bigger. We get more and more weighed down. And then a message from heaven comes which promises to release us from that pain, to lead us to a place of peace. And what it is, it's the gift of forgiveness. It's a gift. It will lead you to a place of peace. It will help you in this process, just as it helped the man in the fable, Falk. It's important to understand what forgiveness is. The word literally in Greek means to send away. It means that we're sending something away from us. We're releasing it to God. We're giving it to God. We're saying in our hearts, God said, vengeance is mine. I will repay. And we're accepting that. We're saying, God, you repay. And therefore, there's a triangle here. There's this person who's hurt me. There's me and there's you. What I'm going to do here, I'm stepping out of the triangle. I'm going to take myself out of the triangle. I'm going to release this. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to let go of it. I'm going to forgive this person. And therefore, it's between you and them. It's between the two of you. Vengeance is yours. You're the one who's going to take this thing from me. You're the ones who will take action on it. That is what forgiveness means. It's different from reconciliation. Reconciliation means when a relationship comes back together in such a way as to allow communication and intimacy. Forgiveness isn't reconciliation. Unfortunately, there are some relationships that are not going to do that. They're not going to come back together like that, which allows a kind of intimacy and communication. That's not what Jesus is saying here. He's not talking about reconciliation. It doesn't mean condoning what happened and believing it's right. It doesn't mean allowing it to happen again. That's not really what it means either. It means sending these things away, giving them to God, and extending forgiveness. I've recently read a book called Forgive for Good by Dr. Fred Luskin. I'd recommend reading it. He's a professor at Stanford. Interesting person, really studied the subject. Listen to how he describes forgiveness. Forgiveness is the peace you learn to feel when you allow these issues to leave. Forgiveness is for you and not for the offender. Forgiveness is taking back your power. Forgiveness is taking responsibility for how you feel. Forgiveness is about your healing and not about the people who hurt you. Forgiveness is a trainable skill, just like learning to throw a baseball. Forgiveness helps you get control over your feelings. Forgiveness can improve your mental and physical health. Forgiveness is becoming a hero instead of a victim. Forgiveness is a choice. Everyone can learn to forgive. And then he describes, here's what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning unkindness. Forgiveness is not forgetting that something painful happened. Forgiveness is not excusing poor behavior. Forgiveness is not denying or minimizing your hurt. Forgiveness does not mean reconciling necessarily with your offender. Forgiveness does not mean you have to never feel those things again. We need forgiveness. We need to understand what it is. We need to understand practically how to get there. That's what I want to devote the rest of the sermon to, is from a practical standpoint. What are some things that we can do to aid us, to continue to aid us in this process? And so I'll devote the rest of my time together on the subject of how to forgive from a pragmatic, practical standpoint. Let's jump into that. Number one, it comes from experience. It comes from experience. Well, what do you mean by that, Doug? I mean it comes from experiencing the love of God. It comes from experiencing the forgiveness of Christ in your life and allowing it to touch us. Jesus, as he was speaking of a prostitute, he made this statement. I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven because her great love has been shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Speaking of this prostitute, he made a profound statement. Whoever has been forgiven little loves little. That's the truth. Whoever has been forgiven much loves much. That's how we respond to God. When we know in our hearts, I deserve condemnation. I've done many things wrong. I'm sinful. I have failed. I have failed these people. I have failed in this situation. When we have that experience and we receive the forgiveness of God into our heart, then we learn how to not love little but love much and to give much. One of the people in my life who exemplifies that is really my first mentor in the Lord, and he's told the story all over the country, so I'm not betraying a confidence, Tom Brown. And when I was a young person, I went into the ministry. I was under Tom's leadership. He was my hero in the faith. He helped me become a Christian. And sadly, he fell into the sin of adultery. And he had to leave the full-time ministry. And that was like a heartbreaking experience for me. He was truly my hero in the faith and such a powerful minister. And I remember at the time just being brokenhearted about it. It was just so painful. And yet God worked in his life and kept working and Tom learned an incredible lesson about God's grace and mercy. Tom has since returned to the full-time ministry, and he leads one of the fastest growing churches on the East Coast. It's amazing. It transformed him into this incredible minister. He's always powerful, but now he's powerful and incredibly merciful, incredibly compassionate, incredibly kind, prays for people, knows the power of God's forgiveness. God's using him in greater ways than he's ever used him in the past because he learned this powerful lesson. He who loves, who has been forgiven little, loves little. Where does forgiveness come from? How do we find forgiveness? It comes from experience. Experiencing God's mercy and God's love. That's the standard. That's the example. It's seeing Jesus on the cross. Say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. As we witness Jesus do that, as we witness Him doing that toward us, it softens our heart. It allows us to learn how to forgive. Point number one, remember that love. It'll lead you to forgiveness. Number two, it comes from perseverance. When hard things happen to us, it's difficult to forgive. And we go through a period of time where we're just trying to figure out what we feel. And so we do that. We're trying to figure it out. We're coming to terms that it really was wrong, some of the things that happened to us, and we gather friends around us to talk to. And that's all totally normal. God provides us with that. But then time starts going past where we form a grievance story, don't we? And we can describe our grievance story to people, and we tell that grievance story. And it's fine for a while. Our friends love us. They care about us. They want to help us. But over time, if we keep telling that grievance story over and over and over again, it starts to drive people away from us. If today you find yourself still telling the grievance story the same way as you used to tell it, with the same kind of deep emotion, if we find ourselves thinking about it often, then you need to consider whether or not you've learned how to extend forgiveness. And I would say we have to persevere in this process. We have to learn how to forgive. And sometimes we have to learn it more than once. We have to persevere at it and learn how to really give it over and over again. It's a bit like grief. It comes back. It will take some time for us to learn how to forgive. But over time, we learn how. Persevere with it. Stay with it. Stick with it. God will bless you. But then number three, and I want to spend some time on this, it comes from perspective. It comes from a change of perspective. Where does the ability to forgive come from? Well, certainly it comes from being inspired by God. It comes from sticking with it. But it comes from a shift in perspective. Listen to what Jesus said on the cross. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Did you ever think about that? That's what He said right there. They don't know what they're doing. You know what He's done there? He's acknowledged that these people are just confused, they're misguided, and He's done something that's a great idea, which is to not take things more personally than you need to. That's really what He's done right there. He's just acknowledged the weakness of people, and He's able to not quite take it as personally as some of us do. What do I mean by that? Sometimes the reason we can't forgive is because we've taken things so incredibly personally. They're trying to hurt me. They hate me. They're against me. They're trying to destroy my life. We've taken things so personally. I had this story related to me. A young man, he was a senior in high school, and he had this wide group of friends. They all went to church together. It's not in this church, so you don't have to worry about this. They all went to church together, and the gals, the gals in their sort of close group, in their church group, decided we're going to have this big date that happens. They all went to high school together and went to the same church group together. So we're going to have this big date together. And so the way they did it is they put blindfolds on each of the guys, and then the girls would come in and they would choose one guy, and they'd then take him out in the town for a big night out. So when this process was over, this person who's relating the story, and he and his best friend were left, and no one chose them to go on a date. So it's like everybody's left, and they take their blindfolds off, and they're like, oh. And they weren't chosen. And this turned into a really, really painful event. Super painful. And so painful, in fact, that they all graduated from high school. They all went their separate directions. When it came time to go back to the 10-year anniversary, this person who's relating the story said, I'm not going. He had thought about this event so many times over the years. I'm not going. They did that on purpose. I never really was that much a part of that group. I never was really liked that much. They never did really care about me. They did that on purpose. They're trying to hurt me. They're trying to do this. So insensitive, so uncaring. I can't believe that would happen in a church group. That's so unfair. And, that's the way he honestly felt. He had rehearsed this many, many times in his mind over the years. And so he didn't go to his 10-year anniversary of his high school graduation. But then a short while after that, he ran into his friend who also was left out. And his friend said, why didn't you come to the graduation, the reunion? And he said, well, because of this event. And the guy looked at him and he goes, you're still thinking about that? You need to get over that. He goes, really? Yeah, I forgot about that a long time ago. I just think they just made a mistake. I don't think it was that big of a deal at all. So the guy got to thinking about it himself and said, yeah, you're probably right. So he got on Facebook and he found the high school senior girl who was coordinating that event. And he kind of said, hey, I've been kind of feeling this way over the years. You know what she said? I have absolutely no recollection of that. I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. I'm really sorry. All it really was an oversight. It was just a mistake. It was a bunch of high school kids trying to come up with a date night. And fouled it up. And made a mistake as high school kids and us are wont to do. But that had tormented him and plagued him for years because he took it too personally. He just personalized it so much. And a change of perspective allows us to not see things so personally. Recently I had a family member come to me and they said, Doug, I've kind of had something in my mind that's bothered me for some years now. And I said, well, what is it? And they said, well, I'm really super sorry we even have to talk about this. I said, well, okay, let's go ahead and talk about it. He says, well, at your wedding, you didn't share about me. And it really hurt my feelings. I'm like, oh, wow, really? Gosh, I'm really sorry. I had absolutely no recollection of that. And I certainly in no way did it on purpose. I was probably just emotional and disorganized and just didn't do it. I'm super sorry. It took this family member years to share that with me. I had no recollection. I absolutely didn't do it on purpose. I was very insensitive. But I was a kind of a young knucklehead. I'm sort of an old knucklehead now, but I was a young knucklehead at the time. But over the years, they took this deeply personally. Jesus, when He's on the cross, by saying, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. I don't think they planned to kill the Messiah today. I don't think they even thought they voted on this thing, the one standing in the crowd just kind of going along with it. They don't recognize the implications of this. And so He's crying out for them, forgive them, Father. Take this away from them. They don't even know what they're doing. He's modeling for us a healthy quality, which is to have a change of perspective. But then that's number one. Then number two, the next way to change your perspective is to, I'm going to give you a challenge here. Change your grievance story. That's a little practical. In fact, write that on your mind. Change my grievance story. Or if you don't have a grievance story now, you probably will someday. Change your grievance story. What that means is, if you look at how the writers of the Bible chose to describe Jesus' grievance story, look how they described it. He was crucified. He was raised back up from the dead. And He became the Savior of the world. That's His grievance story. It's not a grievance story. It's a victory story. It's not a grievance story. Stop telling a grievance story. Start telling a victory story. That's what God would have you to do. See, some of us, we need to learn how to stop telling a grievance story. I'm telling you, it's shaping your future. It's shaping your present. It's shaping who you are as a person. Because you keep telling the same grievance story over and over and over again. Stop telling it. Start telling a victory story. And let me show you an example of this in the Old Testament. Let's read what Joseph says. Listen to the way Joseph doesn't tell a grievance story. He tells a victory story. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong things we did to him? In case you don't know the story, they threw him in a well and they sold him into slavery. Pretty terrible thing to do. So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. So his father appealed for him to forgive. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. See, Joseph tells a victory story, not a grievance story. Now, he could have told one whopper of a grievance story. Really, you want forgiveness? Well, let's talk about this a little bit. Tell me what you're thinking when you threw me in the well. Did you sleep at night after that? Did you know all the family events I never went to? You know where I spent all my 20s? While you were out goofing around in your 20s, you know what my youth looked like? I was in prison, that's what. You think you want to spend 20 years in prison? How'd you like to spend your 20s in prison? And then you're just going to come to me and just ask me for forgiveness? Are you kidding me? I got a story to tell you. Is that all the sorry you're going to say today? That's the best you can come up with? Like, good. Now, what are you thinking here? Get out of here. I'm going to think about it for a while. Doesn't say any of that. What he says is this. Am I in the place of God? Am I the judge? Is vengeance mine? Am I the one to be executing vengeance? No way. He's forgiven. He's pulled out of that triangle and said, this is between you and God. You solve it. Am I in the place of God? Do I have to execute judgment? No way. That's what he's saying. Say, I'm not the judge. I'm not the ruler of the world. But then he says this. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. He's able to insert God into the story. He's able to say, God was at work when these things happened. God is in control. God had a plan here. And God's plan was for many lives to be saved. And He has used me for that purpose. Therefore, this is a victory moment, not a grievance moment. If you can learn how to tell your grievance story as a victory moment, not as a grievance moment, you're going to be greatly blessed for it if you'll learn that skill. You know, when the terrible shooting happened at the theater in Aurora, they interviewed, I think it was Cassie Bernal's brother. I think it's who it was, but I can't remember exactly. But they interviewed him that night. And his sister had been killed at Columbine, and he had been wounded. It took him years to get over his wounds. And they said, well, what is your thoughts on this night? And he said an incredible thing. He said, well, it took me years to overcome this. And I had to learn how to forgive by the power of God. But I did forgive. And I'm actively trying to bring good out of the situation that I went through. So I'm here tonight wanting to help. And wanting to help these people process through this. He was telling a victory story, not a grievance story. I forgave. God is using this for a purposeful event. I'm here tonight to help. I'm here tonight to bless, not curse. I'm not stuck in the past. I'm here in the present. I have a plan and a blessing that I'm experiencing. You see, that is really what Joseph is doing. And that's the key to learning how to forgive. It comes from perspective. Don't take things so personally. Change your grievance story. You know, as we consider these things, consider the practicals of what will help you to learn how to forgive. It comes from experience, God's experience, the experience of grace. It comes from persevering, from continuing to do the right thing, continuing to try, continuing to forgive, even when you don't feel like it. And it comes from perspective. You know, tonight as we close, this morning as we close, let us again read the prayer of forgiveness. Let's leave here this morning able to pray this prayer about those who have hurt us. Let's leave here today able to accept this forgiveness and also able to extend this forgiveness. We'll read this prayer again, and then the sermon will be yours. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. God bless you. Amen.